Hey, deserved listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, the couple's tell-all. Let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Let's see if anything interesting comes out of my face.
In the present.
As an ex-pastor, I have counseled a lot of couples, and I realized I should have been counseling myself because my marriage ended in divorce.
That makes sense. A lot of pastors will have, as a part of their job description, a lot of marital and couples counseling. In fact, marital counseling has a strong history, not currently, but in the past, and that's definition of history, in pastoral counseling. And so 40 years ago, if you were talking about a marital counselor, there's a good chance you were actually talking about a pastor who got a degree in marital counseling, potentially, but maybe not. It emerges from premarital counseling in certain circles. Anyway, and even some ministers will require it in order, if you go to your pastor and you say, will you marry us? They'll say, well, we have to engage in 2 months of premarital counseling before I can agree to doing that. And it's a good idea. And there's a lot of wonderful pastoral marital counselors out there. I think there's even a degree in Seattle, at Seattle U, that it's within the pastoral counseling, the religious counseling department, and it's a licensed marriage and family therapy degree. Anyway, so Ben is doing that now. The thing I'll say, the first reaction I had was, Ben is helping couples, but then he quickly said that he realized he probably needed to follow his own advice, or he needed help himself. And what I'll say to this is that it might be really hard to imagine that Ben would be any good at helping couples, given at least what we've seen on this show. And what have we seen? Well, we've seen what seems to be a high degree of, or some degree of, lack of awareness, lack of reading the room, lack of wisdom regarding even who to date, lack of non-naivete regarding internet, lack of care for what someone else's experience is as you're trying to, get with someone. So how could someone like that be an effective counselor? In fact, I'm guessing a lot of people would say he must have harmed a whole slew of people. And let me say this. I have trained hundreds of therapists. For the past 25 years, I've been a professor and have worked very closely with hundreds of people and very closely with dozens of trainees, meaning that I might have even interviewed them for the program. They might have even been a listener to the podcast before that. And then they interview for the program. We might have some communication around that. I teach them in the program at various different points. I work with them extensively at internship, which lasts 15 months. And we meet every week and talk about their cases and their personal life. And then post-grad, I might supervise them in their practice. And then post that, I might be colleagues with them. So there are some people where I will know as individuals and as therapists, and I will also know their traumas, because proper supervision actually usually involves an awareness of the supervisor, of the therapists, the trainees, the supervisees, vulnerabilities to countertransference, which involves their traumas and their life and all of that stuff. And supervision can often involve in the moment support, which if they're going through a divorce or something. Anyway, so I might know someone for 10 or 15 years or more than that. And I've had a lot of experience seeing people develop, and I've experienced a lot of different types of people. Some of those people have train wrecks of a life, and they might identify that way as well. And yet they can help people. They are effective therapists. The opposite is true as well, that you might find someone who is the opposite of a train wreck. Their life is completely stable, and they were raised relatively well, and they don't have attachment issues, significant ones, and they're terrible therapists. So this association, which the lay public will have, that if your life is falling apart, or like a common thing that people will criticize is like, well, that marital therapist has been divorced before, so they must not be good. And that's just, that's not scientifically demonstrated. there's a analogous situation where you might find a physician who smokes cigarettes and say like, well, they can't be a good physician. Well, they might be a good physician. They're independent things. So when I have trained people who have, and throughout their career, have just had absolute train wrecks in their romantic relationships. Lots of volatility, lots of conflict, lots of breakups, lots of choosing bad partners, and yet they are extremely effective therapists. They're not correlated. It's not like the more train wrecks you have, the better of a therapist you are. It's just independent. It's a different thing. It's different. You know, when I'm helping people, now they do enhance each other. I will say that when I am treating clients for various issues, I do occasionally check in and say, does this apply to me? And then I try to engage in that. For example, a common thing that'll happen is I'll be treating a couple and I will be working with them on conflict or trying to increase their intimacy, trying to increase vulnerability often is the key. And while in session or immediately afterwards, I'll be like, you know, I've been kind of avoiding my vulnerability with my wife. And so I'll just, you know, walk from my office over to my wife, because I practice out of home. I always have. Some people might be surprised by that. Whenever I say that, I think some people are like, huh? It's very common for therapists to have home offices, and I've always had a home office. I mean, in the very beginning of my practice, I tried to use offices, professional offices, because I didn't have a conducive place to practice out of my own home. But it has a lot of pros and cons, you know, practicing out of your house. A pro is that you don't have to pay for extra rent. There's no commute. Often there's better parking for clients in your neighborhood than there is otherwise. So there's all that stuff. If a client doesn't show, you're not just stuck in your office. You can, you know, maybe go for a walk with your dogs or something. Obviously, the cons is your clients all know where you live, and you have to tell your family to do certain things, to be quiet, or, you know, to vacate a certain hallway or something. So that, you know, there are cons. But what some people will say is, you know, your clients know where you live. Isn't that scary? And that is based on a massive stigmatization around clients that assumes that at least a higher percentage than what is reality, that clients are dangerous, violent individuals. I go to therapy. Many of you go to therapy. Are you going to kill your therapist just because you know where they live? The other thing that I'll say is, if someone's going to kill me, they can kill me in an office just as easily as they can kill me at a home office. So, just, you know, plus, it's not like I'm some sort of secret agent on the way home. If someone wanted to follow me home, they could do so pretty easily and find out where I live. So this notion that somehow practicing out, now, are there cons? For sure. And should those be considered? And I've always been mindful of that, tried to have an increased sense of security, maybe security cameras, this kind of thing, which I have on my house now. But my security cameras on my house are currently, and really in the past, were never for clients, because I've never, the other thing is population, like what sort of clients you work with. Anyway, so can he be a good therapist? Yeah. Could he be a disastrous therapist? Yes. Does he have training in a therapist? I don't think so. He's a pastor. So he's not providing a clinical service. He would be providing what we might call layperson advice, I think, unless he can tell us that he does have a degree and a license to practice.
All the young girls, you know, dropping his DMs, you're not worried about that because he has a type. I think, you know, you really can't get to that point of true intimacy where you're just like, you are boyfriend and girlfriend, until you get that face to face. And then everything behind you is just got to go. Like, you can't bring it up. It's in the past.
What? Yeah. Okay. So I think he said a number of things that I want to actually go back and review, but he is essentially saying that when you're online dating where you're dating over video, long distance, and then you meet in person, everything in the past should be discarded. What? If you meet someone over video and as Kim, and you are being told either implicitly or explicitly that you are now in a relationship and it's exclusive, and they have a girlfriend that they're falling in love with and don't tell you, that's not okay. But I think Ben is essentially saying that's okay. The other thing is, I think this kind of applies to him and to Mahogany. Now, maybe he'll say, I should follow this advice myself, but without saying that, I'm pretty sure someone's going to throw this back in his face. But let's rewind that, because I think he said a lot of things.
I think, you really can't get to that point of true intimacy where you're just like, you are boyfriend and girlfriend, until you get that face to face. And then everything behind you is just got to go.
Now, I will agree with that. It's not universal. You can certainly have a lot of intimacy over video conferencing, but as we've seen on the show, and as we can all imagine, as I certainly can, it is hard to really be connected without at least some face-to-face contact. And he's saying that. I think he might be saying, I have learned from experience that until you meet face-to-face, you really don't know what you're dealing with. I don't know why he's saying that to Kim right now, though, because I don't know if that's relevant. Is he trying to tell her to forgive Usman for what he did? I don't think Ben understands what happened. What happened was, after they had met face to face, correct me if I'm wrong, the Usman conversation with Zara happened after they met face to face. Was that the case? Do we know that for sure? I feel like that happened, right? That Kim went home and then Usman had that conversation. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong. If it was before Kim and Usman met in person, then it still doesn't deny the fact that Usman for months lied to Kim.
You can't bring it up. It's in the past.
I'm sorry. Ben's telling us all about our relationships like his is so perfect. Don't sit up here and be all pastory and acting like you can just judge every single one of us, but you better take some of that judgment on yourself.
This is another tick in the column for Ben regarding a personality type that, I hesitate to use the word narcissism because the internet does not understand what experts in my field will be, what we're using the term for. So I will briefly explain what, and you got to listen to my whole deep dive on narcissistic personality disorder, but briefly, it is a defense against deep inferiority, and some people will engage in the defense so often as a constant fight against a deep, deep sense of inferiority and nothingness, actually. For those of you out there who know what borderline personality disorder is, and how a lot of people, due to relational traumas and a lack of attunement, will, when they look inward, they feel empty. And I want to be clear to you out there who suffer from borderline, you are not empty. You just can't see things. And the thing I always say is, you're looking into a bedroom to see yourself, and it's pitch black and it looks like an abyss, but it's not. You just have to have enough attunement from someone else and experience yourself in light of someone else's care that you can slowly turn up the dimmer switch and actually see into your bedroom. And there's a lot of things in there. So don't assume that when you see nothing, there's nothing there. There is something there. And with narcissistic personality, it's the same thing. When they look at themselves, it's particularly at higher degrees, they see nothing. They're empty on this. And the same, in fact, borderline and narcissistic are very close. They're just different defenses to different traumas growing up, or sometimes the same traumas. Anyway, so when you have that, and Ben doesn't come across as high on the spectrum. If he does, if he would conceptualize himself that way, and I would have to ask him, but when you're engaged in that defense against the deep inferiority, you might engage in a defense of constant or frequent efforts to assert the fact that you're superior. And one of the ways that you can satisfy that is by advising other people and coming across like you know things.
I'm heading over to Mahogany's house where she lives with her parents because she said that they agreed to meet with me.
Welcome to my home.
Beautiful.
Do you like that?
Yes, this is gorgeous.
But I want to be clear that I'm not diagnosing from afar. In no way can I know who he is. I'd have to collaborate with him. When I conceptualize people in my practice, it's always after several weeks of collaborative investigation and exploration. Sometimes with personality disorders, it takes me months to really have a certain level of confidence regarding that conceptualization. The other thing is that when I do conceptualize people, it is not a scientific fact that someone has a personality disorder. These are constructs that we have. There's no blood test for narcissistic personality. It's just a way of framing things, and we need a way of framing things so that we know how to do research and also how to provide models for treatment. If we have no conceptualization of a client, we don't know what to do with them. So we always have to have some idea as to what the issue is that we're working on. So that's all we're talking about. We're not talking about some scientific fact that someone, when I do diagnose someone, it's not a scientific fact that they have something. It's a way of framing what they are presenting. And so just understand that that's what these labels mean. Whereas when you have a broken arm, you can look at it under an x-ray and see, oh, the bone is broken. It's not a debatable thing. It's not a construct that the bone is broken. The bone is broken. You can see that. In diagnosing in my field, it's very far from that. So now there are some examples that are more akin to scientific facts, like with ADHD or autism or something like that. But even then, point is that I want to be clear, because I've always held to the ethical responsibility that I have of not diagnosing from afar. The other thing that I want to point out about narcissistic personality disorder is it's not a death sentence regarding a conceptualization. There are many people that I know in my life who are mildly on the spectrum, and I'm still friends with them, and they're still good people. I would even frame myself as being very mildly on the spectrum, that I will have problems with sometimes, but it also is a pro, or at least it's conducive to my career, in that I believe that I have things to say and I want to say them, and that's a bit of a narcissistic quality. The belief that you have valuable things to say. Some people say, well, that's just self-confidence. Well, there's a difference between self-confidence and like being compelled to share your thoughts with other people. It's it's a bit on the spectrum. It's low on the spectrum, but it's in that direction. So I want to destigmatize and sort of bring personality disorders back down to earth. And with Ben, he exhibits some of those signs. Other signs that I've mentioned before are the way that he frames his love for Mahogany. It feels a little grandiose, not terribly so. I'm guessing that if I were to work with Ben, which of course would never happen, that if he did agree with this label, that we would probably collaborate on, say, a 30% down the road, not like 100%. And to qualify for the diagnosis, in my sense, you would need a 70 to 80 percentile range to qualify for the diagnosis. People high on the spectrum can be really problematic in a lot of ways. Ben, take it from me, does not exhibit those high-end narcissistic personality disorder issues. So anyway, so other things that we saw are, so the way he frames his relationship with Mahogany, it's very like it's the best ever, and you'll hear that. It's not of course, when people fall in love, that's not an indication of narcissism. But other things that we saw are his, just his general orientation towards looking a certain way. Again, there's nothing wrong with wanting to look good or talking in a certain way, but it's just a little indication. The fact that he became a pastor, a lot of therapists actually, and professors and podcasters and YouTubers are, I'm guessing there's a higher prevalence, there is among therapists, I don't know about YouTubers, of being mildly or severely on the narcissistic spectrum. So because of that reason, because you just believe that you have a lot of things to offer the world and you want to share it, you can utilize that to good effect and not harm other people around you. And it can actually be a good outlet. For example, for me, the fact that I can yammer to y'all saves my wife from hearing me yammering all the time. She's still subjected to me yammering all the time, but my goodness, if I did not have this outlet, so I want to destigmatize that. Other signs, other things that we saw from him is when he just, in the midst of what he has to know is a high degree of scrutiny on him regarding his behavior with Mahogany, he goes into a mode of helping Gino, of trying to quote unquote help Kim when he's saying things that would be easily flipped back. And, it's that I have things to offer. I'm not. And so the underlying avoidance for narcissistic personality disorder individuals is of vulnerability. We all tend to be afraid of our vulnerability, but particularly for narcissistic people, they're so terrified of their vulnerability because when they were young and vulnerable, they were not attuned to enough. And so they actually, at the age of 2 years old, would judge themselves and try to suppress their own needs because it didn't do any good to acknowledge those things. But they will often project their neediness into other people and try to take care of other people when in reality, they really should be trying to take care of themselves. But it's terrifying to do that. Anyway, so I really hope that that's getting across to people, that everything that I'm trying to say about that. But I'm not diagnosing. So it's a thing to throw out there that if he were to come to me, that would be a road of inquiry I would go down. All right, if you didn't know already, we have a website, which makes sense, and all of our audio episodes are on the website. So if you're ever looking for a particular episode, you can go to the episode list page and do a word search by different episodes. Some of those episodes are on YouTube, so then you can go back to, or you can just search on YouTube on our channel as well. Because sometimes people have questions, and sometimes I'll just be like, well, we already did an episode on that, so you can do a search there. Also, we have an audio podcast if you are familiar. If you're not familiar, you probably have a podcast app on your phone. You can subscribe. It's also on Spotify. And we do a lot more in-depth conversations on the podcast. When I'm reacting to these shows, it's just off the cuff, but the audio podcasts I prep for. Some of them I'll prep for an episode for months just to, get my notes in line. So know that we have that. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.